So during this time of the year, right, before training camp, before the preseason, when we're in this peak off-season mode, is the perfect kind of incubation period for overhype to grow. And what I mean by that is this is the time of the year where fans are really in their own bubble, right? It's Browns fans talking to other Browns fans about sometimes small details about the roster, sometimes big details about the roster, and kind of hyping ourselves up, right? Because during this time of the year, we're not really worried about what other teams are doing, or we're not really focused on other teams. We're just kind of in our own team's bubble. I think this happens with 32 fan bases every year at this time. And what results in that bubble is that you end up talking up a player or overhyping a player, and especially during this time of the year, is where you have a lot of players who get overhyped. I mean, Marquise Brown was one of them last year for the Baltimore Ravens. Mac Wilson was a dude who used to get overhyped. Like, there's a ton of guys I can go on about that kind of get overhyped, especially during this period of the off season. So what I thought would be interesting to do, since we are in that period of the off season, is take a look at every team in the AFC North and talk about who I think right now is their most overrated player. And don't worry, if you're not a Browns fan watching this video, I'm going to talk about the Browns' most overrated player as well. I'm going to be fair on this one. So who are those players? Well, I'm going to tell you right after I tell you to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you don't miss anything. OTAs, well, mandatory OTAs are right around the corner. That means training camp's going to be coming soon. A lot of Browns action is coming up soon. You don't want to not be subscribed to this channel, because right here is going to be where it's at. Also, I want to give a shout out to the patreon.com dog check tier members, and I'm going to start with Fred Pratt III, David Vautier, Relentless Buck Chunt, Rex Kaufman, The Real Quincy Carrier, Kevin Johnson, Marino V, Cleveland Cart, Matt H, Sign Sheets, Gemini, Fight Dirty 74, Yo-Yo, Matt Lloyd, Paul Wilcox, Hundo Magnifico, Rob Ferron, Kyle Stouffer, Lukey from Munich, Dave Roth, J Guy 101, Joe Bobby, Brad Calbo, Dylan W, James McGinley, Orenda Hall, Chad Gimme, David Maldonado, Dylan Hale, Josh Bendor, Mark M, TJ Showman, Stuart Moore, Cleveland BCI, Robert Jermaine Jr., Dave Mike May, John Cummings, Andrew Hirsch, Curtis Bear, Brock Kumar, John Albert, Masayua, Buds Roland, James Nemo, Mac House, Reeve Hertz, Philip Wilcoxon, Marie Vivert, Sean Barron, Goggles Pisano, Corporal Nick Lopez, Dom Gazzulo, Nick Nasty, Ian Whitaker, Colin 216, Anthony Latham, Christian, Dave Strong, Matt Stone, Charles Work, Billy Moose Gentry, Mark Burnett II, Andre Griffin, Otis Wolf, Dog Pound Kai, Greg Ehlers, Austin Bolin, Kirkabar, Easley Badge, Joe Hart, Gabriel Wilson, Max Nilikinko, Lydia Mahawk, Jesus Serrano, Chris Phones, Picktown Browns backers, Mark Kahn, Max Owl Dojo, and Water Bear Marketing. Again, guys, thank you so much for donating that money through Patreon, really helping this show be able to maintain quality, expand, do different things. I'm really excited for what I'm going to do for the regular season this year, and it's really made possible by the people who routinely and reliably donate on Patreon. So again, guys, thank you so much for your support. I appreciate you guys a ton. Now let's talk about the most overrated players in the AFC North. So this list is going to be interesting, right? Because roster-wise, for the most part, I don't think any of the teams in the AFC North are terrible. I think there are some teams that will be below average, but I don't think they're terrible. I don't think they're going to be atrociously bad 2 to 3 win teams. I don't think any team has that. So that means that the level of player that's going to be like listed as overrated might not be as spectacular, but I do think they're still very interesting. And I'm going to start with Pittsburgh, and the guy or guys that I'm going to go with that are the most overrated on the Pittsburgh Steelers is one, I'm going to start with Deontay Johnson, the wide receiver, and also Devin Bush, the linebacker out of Michigan. Now with Deontay Johnson, a lot of people, especially in Pittsburgh, think unironically that, he's going to be the second coming or something close to Antonio Brown. And when you see him on tape, and especially in his highlights, you could believe that, right? Because he is a really good route runner. He's, pretty fast. He's quick. He's explosive with the ball in his hands. But that's the biggest issue with Diontae Johnson is getting the ball in his hands. And he was one of the top wide receivers in drops last year in the NFL. And when you watch those drops, it looks like it's more or less focus drops, right? It's not the difficult catches. It's the focus drops that are an issue. And that is why I'm always quick to pump the brakes on the Diontae Johnson hype, is that focus drops just aren't something that we see go away with many wide receivers. I know here in Cleveland, we've had our fair share of guys who have had focus drop issues. Greg Little, Braylon Edwards, David Njoku's probably the most recent guy. Antonio Callaway, another guy who had focus drop issues. And very rarely do those players fix those things, right? They don't normally fix focus drops. I have no idea why that is. It just seems to be a pretty strong trend. So when we're talking about Diontae Johnson and Steeler fans tell you all he has to do is correct his drops and he'll be great, I think that's a pretty big assumption to make of a player, that it's not fair to put him in the light that a lot of Steeler fans put him in. So that's why Diontae Johnson's up here. Devin Bush is up here too, because Steeler fans still talk about this guy as a difference maker on their very good defense. One of the guys who's going to be a better linebacker in the NFL. And just quite frankly, he hasn't proven it at all. He's played 2 seasons. He lost 1 season to an ACL injury. I think he's played 1 season, lost the 2nd season to an ACL injury. My bad on that one. But the first season really wasn't spectacular. Even the first part of this season wasn't spectacular. You know, it didn't look like above average linebacking play. And this goes again, you know, when you draft a linebacker top 10 in the draft, or you trade up especially for a linebacker, you have to be sure that they're going to be Luke Kuechly, that they're going to be Darius Leonard. They're going to be one of those type linebackers, because anything less than that is not really going to be worth it overall for your defense, right? And I think Devin Bush is going to be decent, but I think he's going to be more or less like a Joe Schobert decent, right? Where he's a good player. He might make a Pro Bowl or 2, but you can lose him on your defense and not really lose that much on your defense, you know, because just linebacking play, it seems to be one of the more interchangeable positions in football. It seems to be one of those where the league is deep in that talent. So unless they're going to be somebody above and beyond, very similar to a running back, right? If he's Nick Chubb and you draft him in the top 10, that's justified. But if he's anything less than Nick Chubb, then that's an issue. The guy I'm going to go with on the Ravens that's overrated right now is Alejandro Villanueva. A lot of people, Baltimore fans, national people included, I think really believe that this dude's just going to step in and play right tackle for the Baltimore Ravens, and that's going to fill the hole that Orlando Brown Jr. left. I feel like their offseason, when I look at it, like if they would have made these moves like 3 years ago, this would have been one of the better off seasons in Raven history. But since they're making these moves in 2020, it just doesn't hit right. It just feels a little off, right? Sammy Watkins, 2-3 years ago, that would have been a phenomenal move. It's not really, because he's had injury issues every single year since he's gotten drafted in the NFL. Kevin Zeitler, 2-3 years ago, that would have been a phenomenal move for Baltimore, but it looks like age is starting to catch up with him. He was let go from the Giants. He just, at this point of his career, I think he's a good guard, but I don't think he's Kevin Zeitler, best guard in the NFL anymore. So I think he's really tapered off in that respect. And Andy Villanueva is another guy that's in that same area, right? 3 years ago, he was a really good left tackle. Now he's an old dude that's only played left tackle his whole career that you're asking to go to right tackle. And when it comes to offensive line issues, there are a few people I trust to talk about this that really have been reliable for me. And one thing that I've heard Joe Thomas say that really sticks with me and makes me wonder about Andrew Villanueva is that when the Browns drafted Jedrick Wills last year, he said the switch from right to left shouldn't be a problem for a college player, but he would worry about it if it were an NFL veteran, because that kind of muscle memory becomes so ingrained that it's almost impossible to unremember. It would be akin to being right-handed for 30 years of your life and then all of a sudden deciding that you're going to start throwing left-handed, and how difficult and almost impossible it is. It's similar to how learning a new language once you get older becomes very difficult because because you've kind of just have all this muscle memory for the one language that you do know. And that's the similar idea for switching from left to right tackle. And Andrew Villanueva is not just older. He is a older tackle who has showed age. I mean, Pittsburgh had a terrible offensive line last year. They weren't necessarily jumping to get him back. So that says a lot about what they thought of him. Also, this is an older guy that you're asking to switch sides on the offensive line. And, Raven fans are very optimistic about this. They're not really even questioning it. And I think that is a huge question mark. Andrew Villanueva on that side of the offensive line for the first time in his career, that's asking a lot. I think Alejandro Villanueva is very overrated at this point because I don't think he's the lock to be a right tackle starter that a lot of people are assuming that he is. Now let's upset some people. We're going to talk about the Bengals here. And, a year ago, I really liked what the Bengals were doing, where they were building. I thought they were going in the right direction. But since that Joe Burrow injury, things, for me at least, have taken a straight downward path. Keeping Zach Taylor when I thought it was obvious that he should have been fired was one of those missteps. I didn't like a single thing that they did in free agency. I really didn't like their draft. This has been a tale of two off seasons for me. I felt like one off season, they were in the right direction. They were trending towards a good place. And in this year, I don't know what they're doing. I'm not really a big fan of it. And part of me thinks that they're doing a lot of the stuff that they're doing because people are overrating Joe Burrow. Now, I don't think Joe Burrow is a bad quarterback. I don't think Joe Burrow is going to be a bad quarterback. This is not an all or nothing take when it comes to Joe Burrow. But where people are placing Joe Burrow in the NFL echelon of quarterbacks right now, when he's only played 10 games, is just kind of ridiculous. I think it has reached a peak ridiculous level at this point, right? I mean, you can read articles, you can go wherever you want. It's not just Bengal fans doing this, because I would be more lenient if it were Bengal fans doing it. I know how fans of teams get about their quarterback, so I'm not really going to hold that one against Bengals fans, but nationally, it's just kind of been ridiculous, right? You've had people putting Joe Burrow in the top 10. You have people making all of these arguments. And my biggest issue with Joe Burrow and why I do think he's overrated is a lot of the justification to put him in this status that he has not earned in already is not really based on anything concrete, right? It's about what he could have done, what he was on pace to do. And to me, on-pace stats are virtually meaningless because you can be on pace for something in the first 8 weeks of the season and then completely crap the bed at the end of the season, right? Let's look at Big Ben as an example. Ben Roethlisberger was on pace for some incredible numbers the first 10 games of the NFL season. And then the last 7 came in and he was terrible, so he didn't achieve any of the things that he was on pace to do. So when you say somebody was on pace for the first 7 games of the season to do something, that does not mean that they accomplished whatever it is that they were on pace to do. Ultimately, you have to do it. You have to finish it. And in the NFL, where not every team is equal, right? So an on pace that really doesn't make any sense. We have gone a step too far with Joe Burrow. Look, I like Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow would be good, but there are people talking about Joe Burrow as if he's Andrew Luck, as if he's a top 10 quarterback already. And I just don't think he's there yet. I also think there are a lot of people not talking about some of the flaws that Joe Burrow has that he desperately needs to work on coming off that ACL injury, one, and playing in an outdoor stadium in a cold weather place like Cincinnati, two, right? He has a weaker than NFL average arm. That is just a fact. He does not have the strongest arm in the world. Now, do you need a strong arm to succeed in the NFL? Absolutely not. There have been weaker arm quarterbacks who have been successful. Now, where those players have been successful, that's kind of something to pay attention to, right? Because you look at the weaker arm quarterbacks in the NFL right now. You talk about Deshaun Watson, who's not a strong arm guy. He played in a dome. But there are examples of weak arm quarterbacks who have played get outside. It's just more frequent that they play out west or they play in a dome. Joe Burrow doesn't have any of those benefits, so that's an issue. Also, an ACL tear can have all kind of effects on your body. And I think it's being overlooked because I think when people see ACL, they worry about mobility. But one of the more pivotal parts for a person's body when they throw the football is that ability to torque the knee. Now, his mobility could be relatively unaffected, but the ACL tear could affect his ability to put torque on the football. And for somebody who doesn't already have a strong arm, that can be a huge detriment for him. I really think people are overlooking some of the things with Joe Burrow that might hold him back. And I also think people at the same time are overplaying or overhyping what he might have been on pace to do as if he achieved it, which I just don't think that should be the case. So that's why Joe Burrow ultimately is probably the most overrated player on the Cincinnati Bengals right now, because Bengal fans are going to hype up a lot of their own players. It happens every year. It happens with every fan base. But Joe Burrow has been hyped up nationally by people who have no association with the Bengals. And I think it has gotten a bit far where they're putting him at, where people are just assuming he's going to be. It's very similar to how people assumed Baker was just going to be a top 5 quarterback in his second year after his good rookie year. And I'm wondering if some kind of a slump is up for Joe Burrow. We'll see during the season. It could be that. It could not. He could be in the 15. He could be top 10. But right now, I do think he's overrated. And now let's talk about the Cleveland Browns. So the most overrated player on the Cleveland Browns, and this one was legitimately difficult. And I think it was real difficult for me to find guys, even for the Ravens, even for Pittsburgh. I think it was very difficult. But the Browns, it was very difficult to find somebody with, because the Browns' most hyped up guy, I don't think is overhyped, and that's Myles Garrett. The quarterback gets a ton of flack, Baker Mayfield. So I don't think there's any world where you can say he's nationally overrated when people are talking about will he get a contract extension when he's been a top 10 quarterback the last 2 years. I don't think he's overrated. Nick Chubb's obviously not overrated. Kareem Hunt's not overrated. Then you go to the offensive line. They were pretty good last year, so I don't think any of them are overrated. Maybe you can make the case for Austin Hooper, but I think a lot of people just don't care about Austin Hooper that much, or to hype him up or to hype him down. So you can make the argument that Austin Hooper is overrated. Odell is somebody who gets a ton of flack for being overrated, to the point to where it's hard to say that he's overrated anymore because everybody is saying that about him. Jarvis is not overrated at all. So I think you have to go with Austin Hooper here, right? Because the contract is a top 5 tight end contract. I think he's one of the 2 or 3 most paid tight ends in football right now. Now, it's not like you're giving him a ton of money. Tight ends don't really get paid that much, so it's not like you're breaking the bank for Austin Hooper, but he's not the 3rd best tight end in football right now. And he was arguably, sometimes, not even in some games, not even the most reliable tight end for the Cleveland Browns. He had some drop issues that he shouldn't have. He was not the best blocker at times. So Austin Hooper is somebody that I'm going to say is the most overrated player on the Cleveland Browns right now. He has a contract that he has to live up to this season, and hopefully he doesn't make this list next year, but that's who I would have to say for the Cleveland Browns. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.